Welcome to Part B of the introductory lecture to Classics and Ancient Mediterranean Studies 1103, Classical Mythology. I'm Roger Travis, Associate Professor of Classics at the University of Connecticut, and I'll be bringing us to the end of the introduction by talking especially about the term classical mythology and what it means, and why it's a good term and why it's a bad term, and how it can help us understand the subject matter of the course. We'll start with the word classical, which you may well have had some idea about the usual meaning of when you decided to take the course. Otherwise, you might not have decided to take the course at all. But it's really useful to get back to where the word comes from because it says something important about why we study classical mythology and why we should and actually shouldn't study classical mythology. The word classical actually comes from a Latin word that means group, that is classis, which is the same word that gives us our word class in all of its various ideas. That is, a class as a group of people who take a course together, a class as a group of people who are of similar socioeconomic background, and even the word class as a kind of positive quality that somebody would have if they did things the right way. That is, if they were like someone who was in the best possible socioeconomic category. Well, all of that comes to mean in the word classical ancient Greek and ancient Roman in kind of a funny way. And that funny way is that for a very long time in our educational system, that is the educational system of Europe and then the United States, the works that one was supposed to study to become a member of that upper socioeconomic group were the classic works, the works that were in the group of the good works that one was supposed to study. Thankfully, over the last 50 years, we've more or less given up that idea of why one should study classics. We don't think that classics are the only works that one should study or the works that make you best, but we still have an idea, and I think we should have this idea that they are very good works to study. And so even though I don't think that I'm going to make you especially better than you would be if you'd taken a course in English instead of a course on Greek and Roman material. It's not something that I think would in the end give up that studying Greek and Roman works has something special about it, especially because Greek and Roman works come from the very beginning of our culture and the very beginning of our civilization, and it's always good to know where we come from. And that brings us to the word mythology. Now, the word mythology has two parts. I think probably when you look at it for the first time with the training that you may have, you see the ology at the end. And that ology actually comes from a Greek word, as does the first part, the myth part. But actually it's divided in a way that may be a little bit surprising. That is, the first Greek word is mythos, and the second Greek word is logos. And what's, I think, really interesting as a way into the subject about this word is that both mythos and logos actually mean word. It's just that they mean a different kind of word. That is, a mythos is a word that has about it a kind of narrative quality, a storyness about it. And the logos, well, in a certain sense, it's a story, but it's a different kind of story. It's a word that has the air of report or of account about it. When Greeks talk about counting in the ancient world, they talk about logos, that is, a catalog, for example, also comes from the word logos. When Greeks talk about stories and the stories that do what we now know as the Rudy thing, they talk about mythoi, and that's the plural of mythos. So we've taken two words, both of which mean word, both of which mean story, but which have very different senses to them, and shoved them together to make the word mythology. Now, for me, this means that that word, which is at the heart of this course, has an essential paradox about it. That is, I believe that the logos kind of story is inevitably always going to tend to kill the mythos part of the story. That is, trying to account for the Rudy thing is something that is, in the end, going to make the Rudy thing go away, and it's going to be dry, and it's going to go on forever, and you're going to end up not really enjoying the course. So mythos and logos are always going to be at odds with one another, and we always need to think about recovering the rooty thing. And in order to do that, I want to share a couple of clips with you, both of which I think do the rooty thing. They both treat of the same classical myth, that is the myth of Hercules, but they do it in ways that I think illustrate very, very strongly what I was talking about in part A of this lecture, which is that myth is not something that is just in the past, that myth is all around us, even when the subject that's being talked about is something like Hercules that comes from that time about 2,500 years ago. So here's the first clip.